Hello and welcome to Module 6. This is an important module. You will have just finished your midterm exam and hopefully you all did as well as you would have hoped. If you did not, be sure to contact me. There's absolutely no reason why anybody should fail this course for giving up at this point. We're getting close to the end and we have ways of seeing you through to the other side. Many cases it's probably not as bad as you're afraid. On the other hand, many of you have probably done very well and are very excited to take on the next tasks. This module is about the presidency and the bureaucracy. It is things that we're looking at is the office of the presidency and the bureaucracy, the large number of employees of the executive branch who are not the president or vice president and whose jobs were established not by the Constitution, but by laws passed by Congress. And these members of the bureaucracy have dual responsibilities. They have many employers, and at the same time, maybe they're completely or partially independent to do what they feel is best as well. We have an interesting section on Max Weber. I encourage you to read as much about him as possible. He was a pioneering social scientist. He studied the Prussian bureaucracy around the time of the First World War and beforehand. Unfortunately died of the Spanish influenza after World War I. However, he came up with what he said to be the 6 characteristics of a bureaucracy, and we still study those today. So you should both look to the slides and to the book to find the 6 characteristics of a bureaucracy. Be aware of who Weber was, W-E-B-E-R, where he was a German, and also pay particular attention to both how the president and how Congress and how the courts oversee the bureaucracy. There's also a slide that talks about sort of the goals of bureaucrats. Another important slide is the one that shows Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson actually built the Democratic Party on something called the spoils system, or what he called the tenure in office or rotation in office. This is the idea that everyone in the bureaucracy should be appointed by a president so that they'll do what the president wants them to do. This has largely been replaced by the modern civil service system. And anyway, I'll walk you through that in the slides. You should also, chapter 7 deals with the presidency, the office of the president, how you become president, things like that. We have a little bit of value added. It's not in the textbook. It's actually in a different textbook by Ken Coleman that I had used previously. It's kind of value added based on what I've learned in the process of teaching this course. The book talks about the president having 2 roles. One is being the head of state, kind of the jobs that a king or monarch of some sort would have to represent the country internationally, to organize and structure and defend the Constitution. Well, the also has a role as the head of government. The head of government meaning the person responsible for the day-to-day operations of the executive branch or the executive officers of the country, such as they might exist. So you might say that the president in a presidential system has both the role of the monarch and the role of the prime minister, if it were a parliamentary system. Sometimes parliamentary systems that no longer have monarchies will have a person called the president who will be in charge of being head of state and will have certain responsibilities, but they'll be much less than the job of the prime minister. Germany is an example of that. They have a president and they also have a chancellor, and the chancellor is the person who really holds the power in the country. We talk a little bit in the 2 chapters about the various executive departments, how the president tries to control the bureaucracy. But the way that we look at the structure is we talk about the 6 powers of the president. His power as it relates to the executive branch, sometimes called his administrative power. We're going to call it his executive power so that we remember it's how he manipulates the executive branch. And this deals with executive orders, executive privilege, and generally the president's power. That book talks about signing statements to direct the activities of the executive branch. The president also has legislative powers, which is his powers with, concurrently, or in opposition to the legislative branch. This largely reflects his power to veto laws. Because the president has the power to veto laws, Congress always has to take into account the policy goals of the president in terms of lawmaking. It takes a 2/3 majority to override a presidential veto, and so a president can virtually stop everything. Remember, it's as hard to override a presidential veto as it is to propose a constitutional amendment. The president also has powers in relation to the judicial branch. Primarily, his powers related to the judicial branch involve his power to appoint or nominate judges. The Constitution actually says the president appoints the judges with the advice and consent of the Senate. What this means in effect is the president nominates someone, and the Senate has the power to either confirm, to not confirm, or to reject a nominee. You might have seen, or you might recall, that prior to the 2016 election, the U.S. Senate just refused to even hold hearings for President Obama's nominee to the U.S. Supreme Court. They didn't do this. It was very controversial, but there's absolutely nothing in the Constitution that forces the Senate to ever act. In fact, there's nothing in the Constitution that forces Congress to ever do anything. And we might notice that sometimes they take advantage of that. The president also has powers, largely, the executive, you might say, has the power to determine who's prosecuted. Prosecutorial discretion usually resides within the Justice Department, but the president appoints, nominates the Attorney General, the Solicitor General, and has the power to remove any executive branch person. So the president has 2 additional powers. One, he's Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. We call this his military power. The president can direct them within the constraints of their budget to do virtually anything. Congress has passed but never actually enforced against the president something called the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act says that the president must inform Congress of any military action that he's undertaking, and they need to approve it within a certain period of time, or he has to withdraw the troops. Presidents have never been forced to withdraw troops under the War Powers Act. When the president doesn't have support, he usually pulls back unilaterally to avoid the confrontation, but Congress also tries to avoid this confrontation. And then finally, the president has what is called diplomatic powers. He has the power to determine he nominates ambassadors, but he also receives ambassadors. He can negotiate with foreign countries. It's entirely his choice. He didn't need approval to move the U.S. Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. These are powers that are entirely the president's. Ostensibly, the ambassadors work for the president, represent the president's negotiation with foreign countries, although they also have many statutory or legal responsibilities that have been established by law such as being in charge of passports and things that make them um, responsible back to Congress. The book talks about the Office of Management and Budget and how it helps the president oversee the budget. The president has a great deal of power in terms of establishing the agenda, both by giving a State of the Union address to Congress, by proposing a budget to Congress, which the Congress does not have to adopt, but the Congress tends to create their own budget in response to the president's budget, either favorably or unfavorably. This is usually included in what would be considered the president's legislative powers. The president's final set of powers we tend to talk about as political power. The president can, a popular president can get an awful lot done. Remember, every person in Congress is trying to get reelected. One of the best ways to get reelected is to be on the side of popular presidents and be opposed to unpopular presidents. Typically, a president is said to be popular if he can get above 50%. There's kind of a gray area between about 47 and 50% where it looks, presidents are usually reelected if they have job approval ratings in about the 47, 48 to over 50% numbers. If that's so, then it becomes difficult. On the other hand, we have something that we tend to talk about as the permanent campaign, or the president's goal to raise his job approval. And what I want you to do is I want you to look through this module, do everything in the module completion checklist. I encourage you to contact me. When you're watching this, you realize you've reached the far turn and you're heading back toward home on the race of the summer semester. So if you need any help, it's my job to help you get there. So I'll talk to you all again very soon. Thank you.